colleaguely speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. We track the power sector pretty closely, and now something very interesting is happening in this sector. A draft electricity amendment bill has been floated by the Union Power Ministry, and private companies would be permitted to enter the retail distribution side of electricity in almost all parts of the country. What does this mean? Will private companies will bid for various hundreds of cities in India where they will be able to distribute power. And there is one interesting aspect of multiple licenses per area, which means that you will be able to choose which company should supply you electricity. That is very interesting. Uh, all this and more on today's show. And I want to welcome Mr. R.K. Pachnanda. As we all know, he has served as the chairman of Haryana Electricity Regulatory Commission, where he's seen all these issues, also functioned as a regulator. He's also an advocate and a former IPS officer. Good to see you, sir, and thank you for your time. Uh, I
Thank
have
you.
I have with me Advocate Sri Venkatesh, who has extensive experience in the power sector and argues regularly at APTEL, the Supreme Court, and the Delhi High Court. Good to see you, Venkatesh, and thank you for your time.
Thank
Uh,
you.
at the outset, I would request Venkatesh to do an explainer on what's happening in the ministry. And what are we looking at in the next 2 years before we go to the specific questions? Could you do sort of an explainer for us? What are we looking? What will be different now in the next 2 3 years? Because it seems to us that a lot is happening in the ministry now.
Thank you, Tarun. So actually, this is the third bill which is now being tabled by the central government with the intent of giving a boost to the power sector. Now, as you are aware, that the entire value chain of the power sector is locked with the distribution licensee, who is the actually the interface between end consumers and the upward, which is the distributor, the transmitter, and the generating company. Now, effectively, despite all that the government has tried to do with so many schemes to rehabilitate distribution companies, that has not taken place because distribution is effectively a monopoly, barring a few cases like Bombay or maybe a few examples in West Bengal. Effectively, licensees are landlocked, and therefore there is really no competition. There is no incentive for a licensee to improve its
So,
efficiency and compete with others. So this is something which the government is now, tried to address by having multiple utility service providers using the same network. Therefore, effectively, it's just like in your, in the good old days when we had television and we had cable television. You could use the same TV, but you could take connection for n number of service providers. Something similar to that is what they're intending on doing, of course, with a calibrated manner. So I think the idea is to unlock the final value and make the licensees more efficient. That's the main objective. And the second, I think, the most discernible fact that I can see from reading the bill is they're quite serious about renewable purchase compliance. Ultimately, the government has given a very, very, I think sometime this year only we unlocked, became the largest solar power producers in the world. So therefore, they're very keen on this green energy being integrated into our grid. That therefore to make that process a little more streamlined and more accountable, because ultimately clean power is required to be purchased by who? By distributors and open access customers and other large scale users. So to ensure that compliance, the government has now provided certain provisions which would make sure that these utilities come to act. So I think generally the idea seems to be to promote renewable and to make sure that the promotion sees the last mile, and also to unlock or to improve efficiency and competition at the distribution level, which is the final last mile between the citizenry and the entire power business. That seems to be the intent behind the bill.
thank you for explaining this to us. Now we'll go to Mr. R.K. Pachnanda. Mr. Pachnanda, you had this opportunity to serve as the chairman of the Regulatory Commission in Haryana, the Electricity Regulatory Commission. And I think early days, I think 5 years ago, there was this whole idea to do this very same thing, which was opposed in the states. Now, again, the government has come up with this idea. What has changed in the past 5 years? A. Secondly, do you think this is taken also because the financial health of the power sector? There are a lot of dues that the generators have to be paid by the distribution companies. Is that the principal reason that also this is being considered? Because I think the dues run into billions of dollars that have to be paid. And the generators, if they are not paid, of course, there is a whole cycle of loans being taken. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Nangia. Well, as you are well aware, everyone's aware that India is the fastest growing economy in the world today. In the words of the IMF, it is the only bright spot in the otherwise dark horizon. We have achieved great heights in every sector of the economy, be it economic growth, be it infrastructure, be it environment sustainability, and be it the power sector. We plan to have 500 gigawatts by 2030. As my friend rightly said, there's an emphasis uh, on the renewable energy in this amendment. So earlier, the central government had various schemes, including RDSS, the Uday scheme, to address financial and operational targets, and to reduce the AT&C costs, and also to close the gap between ACS, that is average cost of supply, and ARR, average revenue realized. But over the period of time, it was realized that it was not in tune with the high growth and quality power at affordable cost that was intended by the government. Our government is very proactive. They want to ensure quality power. They want to ensure competitive rates, competitive tariffs, and at the same time not barter on economic growth, which is non-negotiable. So therefore, it saw that the accumulated losses of the discoms were nearly 6.9 lakh crores, and every time they relied heavily on debts, on loans. So therefore, now with the proposed amendment, A, the tariffs have to be cost reflective. Secondly, now the state electricity regulatory commissions can suo moto decide on tariffs, increase or decrease or fix tariffs, because earlier some state governments used to delay the tariff fixations. Secondly, tariffs, as I said, have to be market driven. And where subsidies are given to some consumers, they have to be given by the government in advance. And then there has to be global competitiveness, because tariffs for industry, commerce, and industry as a category are high, which is a drag on high growth rates, which are drag on economic development and growth. So therefore, cross subsidies for certain categories like CNI, that is commercial and industrial, and certain categories like this have been removed, so that it boosts national productivity and also is reduces costs of supply. And also it's very important in this to accelerate renewable energy. Now various schemes have been undertaken by the government, the green energy open access rules, which includes one of the provisions also that you can produce in one state and take the benefit of RPOs in another state. Secondly, your interstate transmission costs have been waived off for wind and hydro power and solar power, including storage systems, battery storage systems, and pump storage systems. And also other measures like financial assistance to farmers to the tune of 30% by the state government and by the central government. And even for rooftop solar projects, you get benefits. Similarly, they also allowed torrefied blending of torrefied pellets with thermal power, and reduction of rates for charging EVs. So a lot of steps have been taken by the government, and lots more will be taken by the government. And it is also important to boost battery storage and pump storage, because if you have to ensure solar power you have to have proper storage, and a lot of research is being done on how to reduce the cost of storage. Similarly, now the CERC will also issue uh, certain market-driven instruments to ensure that RPOs are complied with. So there is a total emphasis on ensuring competitiveness,
Point.
reasonable rates, and quality power and economic growth.
Thank
So
you.
that is the object.
Thank
Now,
you.
so basically, we also have to, there's a period for amortization of regulatory assets which are being accumulated. And you have to close the gap between ACS and ARR. So if costs are high, then and if discoms are in a loss, they'll not be able to pay the generator or the transmission company for
Point. Point.
wheeling.
Point well
So
taken. I'll
that is
start.
why this has taken place, and it's a step in the right direction, positive direction for good economic growth.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening comment. Now I'll go to specific questions. The word that everyone sort of read here is multiple licenses per area. This is what people have not seen. Venkatesh, could you sort of throw light that how will this work out? Whether the government, if they would to pass this and become a law, what are we looking at here? Second, if you could address this whole question on will this be discoms cherry picking, high value areas where the returns and people sort of the realization of electricity bills is, or will this also mean a cleanup where even small towns will be given? Like, if you are taking, say, Jewar, you'll also be given surrounding villages where the realizations may not be high, but the sector needs to be streamlined. So, will the regulator decide areas to be bid out, or the companies will say, okay, I want this town, and that's very interesting. Could you sort of decode this a bit for us?
So, Tarun, so I'll tell you, under the original act itself, which is the 2003 Act, there is a provision for parallel licensing. This is really how the Bombay and the Calcutta examples came into being, because Bombay, we have multiple licensees operating the same area. The only problem is under the bare text of the unamended act, you can only supply power using your own wires. And that was the dichotomy. That was a fight between then Reliance and Tata in Bombay, that should Tata be permitted to supply to the wires of Reliance, which was finally ruled by the Supreme Court saying that yes, through open access you can. So effectively, what in Bombay this has been happening. Now, of course, because I started off by telling you that licensees have a monopoly of an entire area, therefore their own network becomes their biggest bargaining chip for this monopoly. So if a new licensee wants to come in and lay down its own network, then he has to build the same network all over again and cause duplication.
But they
So
can't
this
use
is
the
what
competition.
correct. So far there was an interpretation issue that could you supply power without using your own wires? Could you supply consistent power through open access? Bombay was solved by the Honorable Supreme Court in a judgment, but the rest of the act is actually was worded in that fashion. So what they've done really now is they've realized that there is no point in saying that you will permit parallel licensees, saying that you would want competition, but ask the second licensee to lay the same network. That is why they have now said that look, network is already laid. Now, if you think you are more efficient than the incumbent licensee who has the rights over his own wires, then you use his wires and supply power to the consumers. Now, where will the competition come in? The competition will come in the power procurement. So, licensees have legacy contracts where extremely high value. They have to service them. So the power purchase cost is very high. So the moment you permit this, utilization of network by other commercial players, then you actually can use. Suppose I'm in Delhi, I'm locked to one particular licensee, but using his own wires, I'll get power from somebody else. Now the other gentleman would not own any network. He would use the existing licensing network, but because his power purchase is more competitive, because he's buying greener power, or he's buying cheaper power, or he's procured power in a fashion that he can give this continuous supply, we can use that network. So that is the great change here. So this was, of course, like Mr. Pachanda emphasized earlier in his opening comments, that this is a Electricity Act is a concurrent subject. So you need to take the states along with you. States are bound to lose, the state-owned discoms are bound to lose monopoly. The government wanted from day one that discom should be privatized, but it was left at the whims of the state-owned distribution companies whether they want to privatize or not. The moment this act is brought into force, whether they wish to be privatized or not will be a secondary question. You can apply for a license, or you can actually use the wires and carry out the business in a particular area. Now, to answer your second question, then would that amount to a certain amount of cherry picking? Yes, it could be susceptible to cherry picking, but then we don't know at what modalities would be prescribed by the state commission. Like you took an example of Jaywar. If somebody wants to use the wires of existing, let's say, distribution licensee in UP and supply power in a Jaywar area, which is going to be a hotspot in the next years to come because of the new airport, then the regulator can tell, all right, we'll give you Jaywar to supply, but we will also ask you and request you to consider catering to a neighboring area which does not have that demand. So that balancing act will always lie with the regulator. So we don't know how this will play itself out. But the good thing that has happened is that you have now very categorically permitted other licensees to come into this business and use the existing network. So the entry barrier will be removed, or so-called the bargaining chip which the existing licensees have. Why, that is why they have this monopoly. That would be taken away, and ultimately, all of it is being done for what? I think ultimately the object is that the end consumer should benefit. That if I'm getting cheaper power, more reliable power from somebody else, then why am I married to this licensee who's not taking care of me? That's the whole idea. So I think it's a very positive step. Though I anticipate a lot of opposition, but it's a positive step
Point
nonetheless.
well taken, though I'll seek some clarification from you on one question was that if the existing transmission infrastructure, which is power cables, were laid by the state earlier, and it's being
Yes,
simply used by the current company that is distributing power, and one more company enters, which means it's only a question of paying wheeling charges to the state
correct, correct,
because the company doesn't own it. The company who's currently supplying doesn't own it. It's also paying
correct.
wheeling charges to the state.
Yes. So the gentleman or the entity who has laid the network will always be compensated because he will get his wheeling charges. So
Point
he
taken.
can't complain that I will be out of pocket. But he may lose customers. He will lose his margin because somebody else can supply cheaper power. So as Mr. Pachanda said, cost of supply. We're all licensees. When they compete, they will compete on cost of supply, cost optimization.
Point
So
very
what
well.
is that's the joint in the play, and that will really lead to a lot more competition, a lot better, I think, a better result for end consumers, so to speak.
Point very well taken. I'll go to Mr. Pachanda. Mr. Pachanda, we say that the state, the government always has larger goals whenever it takes up any initiative. Larger goals could be that the cities could be cherry picked by the best private operators, India's biggest companies. What if they want to do Saharanpur? What if they want to do all the areas outside Patna in Bihar, or if they in Jharkhand outside Ranchi, the villages? Because there it is said that the quality of transformers infrastructure needs improvement. Do you think that will see private interest, or only the cities will be bid out and later nothing will happen? Government should have a larger goal with this. It shouldn't be that top 10 cities or 20 cities are bid out and others areas are with the government discoms which are in losses, and there are huge T&D losses in these areas, we are told. Could you sort of decode this for us?
See, the State Regulatory Commission, as my friend said, shall have to ensure, they'll have to monitor this, they'll have to ensure proper implementation and set rules. And in fact, they have to ensure that, first and foremost, that detailed guidelines will have to be laid down that to ensure that there is no cherry picking. Secondly, the standard of performance regulations and the multi-year tariff regulations will have to be adjusted to, they'll have to be amended to include all the amendments which are taking place. So it is the state regulator which will have to ensure that there is no cherry picking.
Okay, point very well taken. Venkatesh, one thing I wanted to know from you that this act is proposing direct procurement. So a large company who wants electricity, say above 1 megawatt, can directly procure. Does it mean that the companies will only be left with supplying power to houses? Because that doesn't seem like a very lucrative market on its own in many areas.
So 1 megawatt and above, Tarun, the open access has been permitted even now. So large corporates, large what we call as CNI customers, are anyways sourcing out of this particular,
Directly
the
from
incumbent.
companies.
Yes, directly from companies, because when they source out of the company, they pay something called cross subsidy surcharge to the incumbent licensee. Because a large customer, if he goes out of the consumer mix for a distribution company, let's say in Odisha or in Delhi or let's say any other part of the country, then who will bear the cost for that for the power which has been the loss which is happening to the distribution licensee? So there are concepts of additional surcharge or cross subsidy surcharge which are really to compensate this gentleman who is leaving the distribution network and going out. Having said that, this is all was supposed to be transitory, because ultimately the idea should be that everybody should pay equivalent or near equivalent tariff for the same unit of power that we're drawing. This was the objective under which the main act was enacted, that cross subsidy shall become zero. That was amended in 2007 because the reality of our country is the large part of our population is rural, and they possibly can't compete with you in terms of paying capability to make that payment of tariff. And that is why that amendment was carried out. So you're right. People may move out. Large number of customers would move out of the distribution network, but there will be a compensatory mechanism under which the lower section of the society would be protected from that movement. So that is already there in space. But the act actually now. So what has happened was, just on this point, since you asked this question, one perspective is that the people will move out and therefore there has to be compensation. The other perspective is that the barrier to move out had been made very high. Therefore, even if a CNI customer wanted to go out, the open access charges were very extremely high. Therefore, the Act now comes and says you do charge your open access charges for a person to go out and buy power from the market, but make it reasonable so that there is actually an ability for somebody to go out. That's the distinction here, which has been brought out under this particular amendment bill.
Point very well taken. Mr. Pashnanda, one thing, if you take the state of Haryana, of course, we'll take that example since you were the chairman there. If a private company wants to bid for Gurgaon, should the regulator in the state decide that if you are taking Gurgaon, take two districts in addition to Gurgaon or large areas which don't have good infrastructure, where the realization is not as good, so the goals of the state are also achieved. So you get a city which is high realization, good money, but also improve infrastructure around it. So it is a composite thing, not just the good areas that are cherry picked. Could you sort of decode this for us?
Yes, logically, a private enterprise would always like to be cherry picked. But as I just mentioned, that it is the state regulator who has to ensure and enhance rules, rules, promulgate guidelines. I mean, wherever there is private enterprise, obviously capital, be it debt or equity, that will be raised. And so I feel that the private sector should also, stress on smart meters and the smart grid. That should also be ensured by the regulator, so that the entire scenario can be modernized. For example, in Haryana, there was a plan to install 10 lakh smart meters. It was given to a company, and unfortunately, there were not enough producers of smart meters at that time. So all this has to be calibrated properly. Once the amendments are out, then the state regulator will have to frame rules. So this is one possibility which you're saying, that along with a creamy area, you take a different area also. But that is for the regulator at that time. Different states have different regulators, as you are aware. So, and one regulator is not bound by the guidelines or the rules set by the another regulator. So, this will have to be set out by the regulators in the interest of the state and in the interest of the consumers.
I was told by someone that this is what is being planned, that there'll be composite areas, not only shiny
Yeah.
areas or big towns, because the state is unable to develop that infrastructure. The private players will be able to pump in money and still make a lot of profit.
Exactly.
Venkatesh, one last question to you. Do you see? I've been told that unless states cooperate, these things can't happen, because suddenly there'll be 10,000 people on the road saying we don't want privatization. There are vested interests involved. Do you foresee a lot of resistance to this, or do you think that this will go through in many large states? Because
Me, yeah, Tarun, see, I ultimately states have to be brought on board for an amendment in a concurrent subject enactment. So therefore, to that extent, they will have to be. I don't see a lot. See, there are a couple of things where central government has become the ultimate arbiter, which is renewable purchase obligation. The percentages will be set only by the central government. Then there are certain standards which only the central government can decide. See, who is a captive user and who is a captive generator. These are all interpretation issues which central government says, look, I will decide, you all implement. So barring these two, unlike the previous amendments where there was one got a feeling that the autonomy of the state was being taken away, this amendment does not seem to do so. It is only amending certain principal provisions, leaving the complete joint in the play for the state regulator to frame regulations and regulate the object of the act. Ultimately, as Mr. Pachnanda says, you may permit anybody to use anybody's wires and distribute power and not have your own network under the act. But how will that permission actually fructify? What are the terms and conditions? How will the state want to regulate it? That is something which has been left with the state under this bill. So therefore, I am personally quite positive. Of course, every time being part of the energy sector, every time a bill comes, we try and envision all kinds of scenarios. But 2014 and 2022 did not take off. I'm hoping that this would actually see the light of day, and these amendments, because the one more very critical amendment which we have not spoken much about in this today's call is you've put a deadline before for the regulators also to solve these disputes. See, ultimately, there's no point for litigations to be languishing before regulatory commissions and not getting decided. So there's a deadline put on that. Regulators have been given certain more powers to enforce their direction. So actually, it's all in all a very positive bill. I mean, of course, no bill would be to anybody's perfect satisfaction, but I see it as a net positive because I represent all kinds of parties, and I see that everybody seems to be getting something more out of it, and their problems are getting solved. In fact, one more very interesting point in the bill, which again which we've not spoken about, they have increased the strength of the tribunal. Now, NCLAT has multiple benches. Our APTEL has only two. And that is the reason why, there is such a huge pendency in APTEL. And this has been increased, something that we've been talking about it for years altogether. So all in all, I see the positive bill. I hope, and I don't see any red flags which would be staunchly opposed if people understand the bill and see that the regulators will be ultimately the arbiters for deciding how the bill is implemented. I hope to see the bill going through.
Thank you. Once this is presented before Parliament, we get to do one more discussion. So lots of good news from this bill. The last point that Advocate Sri Venkatesh said was on increasing the number of members in APTEL, given the fact that sometimes it takes up to 3 years for a matter to come up, is what we've been told. So all in all, good news. Let's see how much of the increase happens. But I would like to thank Mr. R.K. Pachnanda, former chairman of the Haryana Electricity Regulatory Commission, Advocate Sri Venkatesh. Thank you for throwing light on this subject, and we shall continue this conversation as the bill is presented, I think, in the next session of Parliament. Goodbye till then, but thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.